As a kid, who else was afraid of the dark? Raise your hands. For me, I was a pretty big pussy back when I was like, 6, 7, or 8, like one of the main protagonists were in this movie. I often got scared at the thought of getting up and going to the toilet by myself, or even sleeping with the light off. As I grew older, I was able to sleep with the light off, but then sometimes I would kind of scare myself thinking a pile of clothes on a chair had a face. And sometimes when in the shower, even nowadays, with the amount of horror games and movies that I've kind of taken in, whenever I close my eyes in the shower, I would constantly be thinking, what if some dark force potentially attacked me or jump scared me? Don't lie. Some of you probably have felt the same way as well. Reason I'm saying all this is because here we have a movie about the thing that scares us the most as a kid. Something that should, scare almost every single one of us in a more personal way. And I initially thought, after watching this movie last night, that I wouldn't be able to sleep. But I ended up sleeping just fine. And it's either because I've kind of grown out of my fears, or this movie wasn't scary enough. So the Boogeyman follows the life of a family struggling through the loss of a loved one. When a mysterious person shows up at their doorstep unannounced, he leaves behind a terrifying supernatural entity that plays with their fears, torments them, and tries to feed on them during their most vulnerable state. So this is a movie that's based off of Stephen King's novel of the same name. There are also a lot of, or I don't know if a lot of, but there have been past Boogeyman movies as well. But I'm not going to go into those because quite simply because I've never watched any of them. And I never read the novel either, so I went into this completely blind. I did hear how this movie doesn't really live up to its source material. I'm not quite sure though, that's just what I read. Off of one singular person, so do let me know if you know, for those of you who know what you feel about this movie. For me though, I had a fairly decent time with this one, though I still feel like this movie could have been so much more, and the ending left a lot to be desired. From the get-go, you are introduced to this family and you are spent a lot of time watching them struggling through their grief. And you do learn to kind of feel for them while this mysterious being was hunting them down. Though I wouldn't say I felt enough for these characters to want to see them succeed. Mostly because they felt pretty disposable for the most part. And also for some reason, I kind of really wanted the Boogeyman to succeed. Just for them to kind of be like, bam, surprised you guys. But for the most part, this film was rather more anxiety-inducing than scary or horrifying, which isn't a bad thing. This film does get pretty damn suspenseful at a lot of parts. The sound effects also put you on edge and mimic the same sense of when you were a kid and you kept hearing these weird noises. And the performances from the main cast definitely did help. The whole time I was thinking, how are they going to get out of this? How are they going to get out of this? It was pretty interesting to watch unfold. The movie and its meaning unravels and you understand more the more you watch. But it is one of those cases where what you thought it was is much scarier than what the film is ultimately all about. This movie is it's less horrifying than I thought it would be, because we actually get to see parts of what this thing, the Boogeyman, looks like, which makes this more of a monster movie rather than a psychological horror one that I was expecting coming into it. Kind of surprised me there. The psychological aspect is definitely still somewhat there, but the whole idea of, this being that you were so scared of as a kid, that you really didn't really know what it actually looked like, but it was kind of dark and mysterious, right? This whole kind of idea kind of disappears towards the end. You know what? It would have been cooler and more freaky if the Boogeyman looked different from different people's perspectives. Man, that would be really freaky. That would be that'd be crazy. And that you kind of learn to live with it and kind of learn to overcome your fears rather than what ultimately happened in this movie. Like, I feel like the overall idea of this movie kind of gets lost towards the end, at least from what I thought it was, like, you know, going into it and watching the trailers and all that, and within the name as well. Now, like I said, I obviously, you know, didn't read the source material, okay, so don't tell me shit, you know, that, like, that's just what I think the movie could have been made to just make it better. But maybe it's one of those scenarios where, I mean, there's really little that you can do with the source material. You know, the Boogeyman, it's a very limited concept, it kind of feels like, you know what I mean? Maybe a child should watch this movie. Like, force a child to watch this movie. Man, they would definitely be frightened. It might even be one of the most scariest movies that one child has ever watched in their life. But for me, for a lot of, you know, the target market, I guess, for this movie, right? People over 18. That's generally what it's billed as. It's just, the concept isn't scary anymore. Ultimately, The Boogeyman served as a neat little suspenseful watch. I enjoyed the acting and the suspenseful build-ups. Some sequences were also very nerve-wracking to watch, but overall, I just feel like this movie could have been better if it went down a different path. But I don't know though, like I said, the novel probably restricted it from doing that, and, you know, maybe I wasn't allowed to do that, but I definitely could have seen a way this movie could have gone, like I said, that would have made it better if it focused more on, I guess, the psychological aspect rather than the physical nature of the being, which really, you think about the Boogeyman, you think about the thing that you're scared of in the dark, the thing that you don't know, the thing that you don't know what it looks like. This movie is kind of like, it doesn't really like, you know, show that idea to the full potential, or even understand that idea, I guess. I'm going to give The Boogeyman a B-. Reason why is because this movie, look, as it's the movie critic within me to kind of criticize this movie like I did, right? But ultimately, overall, I still had a fun time watching this one, right? I like not knowing what to expect. You know, like, I had a really fun time kind of watching through this one. But it's one of those situations where at the end, after watching through everything, you're like, oh, that's what it's ultimately all about. Like, a bit of an anticlimactic finish. But, you know, while watching it, it was really exhilarating and, like, fun to find out what it was ultimately all about. But then when you ultimately find out what it's about, it's like, oh, could have been much better. And I was surprised about how easy it all worked out towards the end. Like, I was like, wow, really? Like, I was thinking, how were they going to get out of that situation? Okay, I'm not going to say anymore. I'd be at risk at spoiling it. But yeah, ultimately, definitely the build-up more terrifying than the end result. And with this type of concept as well, the Boogeyman, you know, it's very limited, like, with what you can do with it, and it definitely showed in this movie. But I still had a decent time with it while watching it, so I took that into consideration. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think down below. Like and sub if you enjoyed, and as always, feel free to check out any of my previous videos. Until next time.